This is a very, very bizarre episode of the Lunduke Hour in so many ways. Normally, I cover things that are open source or free software-y or Linuxy or something related to that. This time, I'm covering OS 2. Specifically, a new OS 2 derived operating system called ArcaOS. And this is truly bizarre. I am so excited. So I'm going to be talking to Louis Rosenthal in just a moment. I, 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 I'm somewhat speechless. I actually just finished recording the interview with him, and I've got lots and lots of thoughts. Stay tuned after the interview. I'll give you all sorts of thoughts around that. But first, the studio. For those of you watching the Lunduke Hour and watching my continued progression into getting the Lunduke Lab studio all set up just how I like it is progressing. I feel like the sound's getting a little bit better. My monitor actually arrived. So those of you who saw the last show I did, I was cuddled up to a laptop, like nuzzling with it, just loving on it because I didn't have the monitor in place. And I like this. I like this setup. I'd love to hear you guys' feedback, watch the interview, see if it really works for you. I just really like having it be real. There's nothing wrong with a split screen. The Lunduke Hour has had that split screen thing since we started. But it feels... I don't want to use the word fake, but it feels a little fake. It doesn't feel tangible to me. It's kind of like the difference between watching a show with puppets and Muppets or watching a show with CGI'd characters that look like puppets. And it's not quite real. There's a lot of compositing going on and a lot of those sorts of things. And it just doesn't feel quite right. But I still want to be able to do interviews, and I still want to be able to bring people in, but I want them to be a part of the environment. And so we got this monitor here. It just actually arrived about 20 minutes before the interview began with Louis Rosenthal. And so I set it up really fast. And you'll notice during the interview that it is, if you look at the top and the bottom of the screen here, you'll notice it's a Chromebook. I had to do this really fast. So I have that, that little tiny cheap Acer Chromebook I reviewed some time back. I wiped the system on that and put it off to the side recently, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it. And then the monitor arrived, and I'm like, oh, great. I didn't think it was going to arrive in time, and I was wondering what the heck I was going to do. And so I'm like, you know what? I'll just plug it in and do it because I was going to do the chat with Louis via Google Hangouts. And I don't use Google services all that much, but since I was going to be using Hangouts anyway for this, I'm like, let's just bring out the Chromebook, plug it into the HDMI port in here on the monitor, and we'll just roll with it. Going forward, it'll be hooked up to my little OpenSUSE box with Firefox and all that sort of good stuff. But for the moment, it's just Chrome on Chrome OS, which is, it's fine. It's fine. So things are really coming together here. Bits and pieces, a little bit at a time. The lighting's not 100% perfect. It's not terrible. It could be way worse. But I've got the lighting all set up here, and I do need to tweak it a little bit. I got some really good notes from a friend of mine who does professional lighting for TV shows, and he basically told me I'm doing everything wrong. Just everything. So I have notes from him. So I need to sit down this evening and rejigger all that stuff before tomorrow's show. But anyway, I love everybody's feedback. Thanks for giving me all the feedback on everything. This is where the show is going to be going forward. We've started to put soundproofing in. You can't see all of it right now. On the other side of the wall, some of the soundproofing from the original studio has come downstairs. Still need to bring some more down. I need to order some more for the area behind the workbench here. But it's getting there. It's getting there. We're slowly becoming a real lab. And then during the lab segments where I'm building and working on things, this monitor here, this nice little monitor just moves off to the side, and it's got a place for it literally right over here off to the side for a table for it to sit on, and it can just move in and out nice and quickly. It can stay all connected. Just trying to keep everything nice and simple. Also, this episode is brought to you by Pogo Linux, System 76, and viewers like you over at patreon.com. This is Pogo Linux, my friends. Check this out, a little wireless mouse. Feeling like a conductor, getting it all ready to rock and roll. This is PogoLinux.com, and I wanted to show you guys something real quick because this is one of my favorite things about Pogo Linux. If you go in here and you say, I want to look at the servers that Pogo Linux offers. Let's say I just want to go ahead and look at all of their Intel Xeon servers. Okay, no big deal, no big deal. And I want to scroll down, and here is their chart. Here is their list of servers. Notice how it keeps going and going and going. And, oh, look at that. It's still going. Holy heavens. It's still going. The nice thing when you want to get a server from Pogo Linux is that they have so much to choose from, you know? So you start with your base server, something you like, something that just really says, hey, this is going to fit my rack unit. This is going to be just right. I needed a 2U thing, right? So if you wanted a 2U, you just go in there and say, I want to configure a 2U unit. It's just like this one right here. And you get to go in and say, you know, what CPU does it have? What sort of RAM does it have? All sorts of things. And then you actually get to go in and pick what operating systems you want to run on it. And that's just the best. It's just the best. I think as a Linux user, all too often I am used to buying hardware, whether it's a laptop or a desktop or you know, a server or rack unit or something, and just assuming it ships with Windows. You know, you just assume that it ships with Windows. But with Pogo, you know you get Linux, and you know you get to choose your Linux, and that's just super cool. Anyway, PogoLinux.com, one of the sponsors of this show, along with System 76. I can't recommend these guys enough. Truly, truly phenomenal guys. All right, all that out of the way. Let's talk to Louis Rosenthal, the guy, or one of the guys, behind the new OS 2-based ArcaOS. Here he is. This, my friends, is Louis Rosenthal. Louis Rosenthal? Louis Rosenthal. I actually said your name correctly. The last several interviews I've done, I have managed to mangle everybody's name, and I feel very bad about that. He's the managing member of Arca Noe, which is the group behind ArcaOS. Louis, why don't you give everyone the quick high level? What is ArcaOS?
ArcaOS is a build of OS2 Warp 4 for the 21st century. So if you think of OS2 Warp from 1995,
yeah,
and you give it a facelift, and you bring its networking capabilities up to what we're using these days, and you refine some of the documentation so that it doesn't read like it came out of 1995.
I like 1995.
1995 is great. The problem is that we don't use networks or computers the same way now as we did then.
That's very true.
And OS2's built-in networking based on NetBIOS is terribly insecure.
Terribly. Yeah.
So ArcaOS ships with Samba 4, which allows secure connectivity to even the latest Windows-based networks.
Nice, nice. All right, so full disclosure, I am an OS2 guy from a long time ago. I ran a 2-line BBS under OS2 Warp 3 back in 90. I think it was about 1996 or so, and those were great times. And I loved OS2. It was a great system. I mean, it was, you know, it was a better DOS than DOS. It was a better Windows than Windows. I loved being able to have my friends come over and show them that I had an actual multitasking system, that I had multiple DOS BBS things up and running at once. People dialed in, and I had a bunch of Windows apps running where I could play Civilization 2 and everything else. That was so cool. That was super neat. But I mean, but OS2 being a closed source system, produced by IBM, and before that IBM and Microsoft, how do you manage to continue the development of it with that in mind?
Well, over the years, OS2 has sort of evolved into a hybrid between the commercial core of the operating system and a lot of ported open source applications running on top of it. So, for instance, OS2, ArcaOS. Let's be clear, because OS2 doesn't do this. ArcaOS ships with a modern Firefox build. We ship with Firefox 38.8. We have Firefox 45.5 that's just become available, and 52 will be in the pipeline in the next month or so.
That's sweet.
There are a lot of other ported Linux applications that keep the system running like a modern Linux system in many respects. So yes, it is 32-bit, and it's certainly limited to the 4 gigabyte boundary.
Yeah.
We do have some rudimentary PAE support, so we can create a RAM disk in memory above 4 gigabytes now. And for some applications, such as Firefox, where you want your browser cache quickly accessible,
yeah,
that really does do quite a bit to improve the throughput of the system. So there are other open source components that are bundled with ArcaOS, and we have some ability to address issues that IBM left unfixed in Warp 4 and the later MCP2, which is the real basis of ArcaOS, which is the Merlin Convenience Package, Warp 4.52. So our agreement with IBM allows us to make certain binary changes to allow OS2 to install on modern hardware. And that's really what our focus is.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool. It does seem like a tricky feat, though, to pull that off. I mean, how has juggling the licensing of all this been for you guys? I mean, that does seem like a bit of a nightmare.
You know, you are the first person to hit the nail on the head with that. I would tell you right now, honest to goodness, hands down, I spent probably as much time dealing with licensing agreements and negotiating contracts as we did putting the software together and making a product.
Oh, I feel for you guys so much. That seriously, that'd be like driving an awl right through the center of my forehead. It just sounds horrifying. I got to applaud you for doing this, though. OS2 really, unlike so many systems, OS2 still is a system that I think back on very fondly. You know, and not just in that pure nostalgia way, but in that the way it works. It's a truly interesting and fun to use system for a nerd like me, and so I love seeing that it's continued. Mm-hmm. But guys like me can't be your one and only target demographic. Who are you targeting ArcaOS towards? Who's the end user?
You know, it's a very interesting point that you bring up, because there are only a small number of diehard individual users still either using OS2 or interested in trying a new version of OS2.
Right.
However, there are a large number of Fortune 500 companies with entrenched bases of OS2 running on very, very aging hardware. And those machines are suffering very, very difficult deaths. Power supplies go. Try to find a power supply for something that was built before ATX power supplies.
Yeah, a lot of eBay and Goodwill scrounging is where it ends up being.
That's exactly what it is. And these systems run a tremendous amount of infrastructure in the US and world economies. Financial institutions still use OS2, and I'm not just talking about banking and ATMs.
Right.
I'm talking about insurance companies. I'm talking about internally at banks, not out at the automated teller machines, but internally for their inside processes. manufacturing, packaging, um, liquids processing. So, for instance, household cleaners, shampoo, fabric softener, detergent. The machines.
Just so you know, you are the first person to ever be on the Lunduke Hour talking about fabric softener. This is a pretty big moment. Yeah.
If you would have said to me 10 years ago, do you think you'll ever be on the web talking about fabric softener? I would have said absolutely not. The problem is that these systems have been in use for 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
Day in, day out, they just run like toasters. The problem is that those machines on which they're running are rapidly wearing out. And you cannot install IBM's Warp 4 on a modern machine.
No,
doesn't
you can't.
work.
You can't. It's a royal pain. I've got a copy of Warp 3 and Warp 4 just to keep around, and yeah, it doesn't run on anything.
I mean, the best you can do with it is you can run it in a virtual machine, which works fine for some things. But if you're using OS2 as a control program for robotics, you need access to the serial ports in the machine, sometimes multiple serial ports. You may need access to larger video displays for touchscreen controls for manufacturing.
Right.
You can't do this in a virtual machine. It just doesn't translate. Our focus, although we don't exclude running ArcaOS in a VM, but our focus from the beginning was on running OS2 on modern hardware. And we're almost there. We still require a full CSM under UEFI machines. So we don't have complete EFI capability yet. And we don't support GPT for hard disk partitioning.
Sure.
But those are two things that are on our roadmap, and we plan to do what we can to support those technologies going forward.
Fascinating. I gotta ask, how much do you use the system personally, like day to day?
I use it every day.
Every day, like as your general purpose
as
system.
My general computing platform. I use that, and I'm sitting on a Novell network.
with NetWare and everything.
NetWare and everything. I have Linux servers on the network. I have a couple Windows servers on the network. And I use OS2 on my desktop, on my ThinkPad, every single day, 24 hours a day. That's the only operating system I run.
Really?
Well,
hardcore. Yep. I applaud you, sir. I'm amazed that one, that you do that is great. I think that's fantastic. And two, that you've been able to get OS2 to a point where that's even possible is kind of amazing nowadays. I mean, you wouldn't hear of something similar happening with, say, a classic version of Mac OS, or other classic operating systems. They just simply die and get run in emulators, and that's the end of it. The fact that this has been updated is truly, it's impressive, especially considering it is inherently a closed source system that you can't just grab and recompile for new architectures.
Exactly. Now we have a method for booting OS2 on a DVD. The operating system ships on a single DVD image. It's about little over a gigabyte ISO.
Yeah.
And there's a pre-boot menu. So if you do have to make some particular changes for drivers to run on your hardware, you can make those changes before the operating system actually boots up. And then we boot and go.
Is there, as you look forward, do you think there's any way to make it so that ArcaOS can have realistically support for additional platforms, higher memory limits, those sorts of things realistically? I mean, because it seems like there's such a history of I don't want to say code debt, but you know, it's a big project that's been around a long time, and since you don't have
Yeah.
access to so much of the code, is it possible to do such a thing?
Well, we have made some improvements to the kernel. We actually do say that we have a new kernel that is shipping with ArcaOS, so it is newer than IBM's kernel. We have a new
Interesting.
loader. Um,
Now wait,
do I?
how? I don't. I
Yeah.
don't. I feel like you're on a roll, but I've got to ask, how with that kernel was that built from scratch? Was that licensed from IBM or one of the previous companies that's been working around OS 2? How did that work?
The loader was built from scratch.
Okay.
The rest of the kernel was patched IBM kernel.
How did you manage to patch it? That is fascinating to me because I mean, is that something that you gained access to the source for?
Our No, IBM would not give us access to source. So we got the next best thing, and that was a limited waiver of the non-reverse engineering clause
No way.
to allow us to reverse engineer parts of the operating system that we knew needed to be fixed or modified. And
That is
then
so hardcore.
binary patches to those portions of the kernel that we back up, and the kernel was specifically one of the components that we negotiated at the ability to reverse engineer.
That's amazing.
So the basic kernel is IBM's kernel with
Yeah.
our patches applied. The loader is a completely rewritten loader that is PAE aware. As I say, we're able to use that high memory for a RAM disk now.
Yeah.
Later on, we would like to be able to use it to swap code, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. That's quite a bit of work.
That is fascinating. I mean, that is just so hardcore. I mean, massive nerd cred, my friend. That is not only did you manage to get IBM to agree to that, but the fact that you were reverse engineering the OS 2 kernel and applying better, that is awesome. I mean, that is
It's
truly
pretty
awesome.
heady stuff. Yeah.
I'd say so. I mean, that is just so much work. It just seems like it would be so much better if IBM would find a way to like give you guys a license to the code for the kernel and maybe a couple other little specific bits of the OS. I know it's probably difficult to release a lot of access to source code. I get that there's probably a lot of different licenses involved there, but it just seems like it would be so good.
The problem with OS2 is that OS2 was developed at a time before we did things the way we do them now.
Yeah.
So there were so many third parties involved in the development that every time we need to look at something, we have to ask permission, and IBM has to go research to see whose code it is, to see whether they can grant us access to it.
Holy moly.
There you have it. That's
is-
the tough part.
So,
That's the tough part.
are you familiar with the Haiku project at all?
Yes,
Yeah.
I am.
So just when I think of what you're doing, it reminds me a little bit of the Haiku project. Totally different strategies, of course, but when I look at Haiku is taking the B operating system, BOS, and basically they piece by piece replaced every single component with their own components, and then they released them open source and whatnot. Is that something that's viable in OS 2 land? Like, is that something that can be done where you could piece by piece replace it with like an open source version, and eventually, in the end, you have whether it's an open source or closed source or whatnot, but at least one that you have access to the source code for a full system. Is that doable?
That proposal was made back in the late 90s by a fellow by the name of Lynn Maxon. And Lynn proposed what was called the Warpicity Project.
Good name.
And the idea was to replace gradually via the use of fix packs, which is the way IBM used to release their fixes, and gradually replace the IBM proprietary code with open source workalikes. The problem is that there is a lot of code in OS2.
There is.
And there's a lot of code for which the sources are not readily available, and figuring out how this stuff works the way it does is a tremendous amount of work.
Huge.
The workplace shell itself, the OS2 desktop, which is the killer application on OS2. As far as we know, those sources do not exist in one place anymore. Really?
Wow.
The story is that those sources have gone missing, and some developers had some pieces and other developers had other pieces, but making patches and fixes to the workplace shell is very, very difficult. So replacing it completely would be an amazing amount of work. Amazing.
It just, it somewhat breaks my heart because it is such a quality system. I mean, I'm a Linux guy nowadays. Linux kind of is everywhere around me, and a lot of the reason that I'm such a Linux guy is because of OS2. I fell in love with that as a system, and then kind of got burned, without placing any blame. I had a system that no one was making anymore,
Yeah.
and it bummed me out. And so I ended up going the full open source route because I won't get fooled again. Like I just didn't want to let that happen again. And
a lot of people felt the same way. They felt betrayed by IBM. They felt burned. And the fact of the matter is, OS2 is a product of a large company, and that company is free to do whatever they want with it.
Sure.
And they decided that for whatever reason, the time was right for them to withdraw it from the general marketplace and to try to push everyone over to Linux or to AIX, which is really what they did. That was their strategy. And you can't fault them for it. I mean, that was a business decision.
It's their business move. I agree. A business has got to make money. They're responsible to their employees and their shareholders, and they've got to do what they got to do. I just, as a nerdy guy, it just bums me out. So when you come along with ArcaOS, or formerly, what was the code name before it was Blue Lion, I believe?
Blue Lion.
Blue Lion. What's the origin for the code name, by the way?
We needed to come up with a name that could not be challenged for copyright, and so we knew that colors and animals were safe bets. So we came up with
colors and
blue
animals
for IBM, obviously.
Yeah.
And lion, I don't know. I mean, I guess it could have been a giraffe.
Blue giraffe doesn't have quite the same ring to it, so I think you made the right call. How long have you been working on this? How long has ArcaOS Blue Lion been kind of in active development?
We penned our agreement with IBM in September of 2015.
Okay, so close to 2 years.
Yeah. We got to work right away as soon as that agreement was in place. Now, the company was formed prior to that, and up until ArcaOS, our main product was and is still we continue to support it. We have a subscription service for updated drivers and software for OS2 and Ecom Station. And we will continue to market that. I mean, we have customers who, for whatever reason, legitimate reasons, may not directly move to ArcaOS. They've got systems that are in place that are running. There's no sense turning everything upside down.
Sure.
And that drivers and software subscription content will work just fine on those machines.
That's totally fine. I mean, why not, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, or break it and build something more awesome. Either way works. Yeah.
There you go.
So, what is viably doable on the platform? So, when I put this out there to people, the general overarching question is why? Why would I be interested in this? And clearly, there's a ton of markets that this is extraordinarily valuable. That's
Mhm.
obvious. But let's say for a home user or a software developer type, is there a value in Arca OS as a home user operating system in 2017?
Well,
Other than for nerds like you and me, other than for guys that have been living in this sort of thing for a long time.
if you prefer the desktop environment of the workplace shell, OS2 is the only way to go. If you are completely fed up with Linux desktops that are halfway functional, that are working fine until you apply an update and then they're completely broken, there is definitely a market for an operating system with a desktop that works the same way now as it did 20 years ago, even though it looks a lot better.
Yeah.
The workplace shell is extremely extensible, and we ship a, a, quite a bit of enhancements to the workplace shell with the operating system. But under it all, it still works exactly the way it did. So if that's one of your concerns, then ArcaOS fills that bill. If you would otherwise be a Windows user and you don't like the direction that Redmond has taken with requiring the operating system to phone home on a regular basis, ArcaOS does not do that. What I tell people right now is you can go to a desert island, and as long as you have electricity to run your computer, you can just run your software to your heart's content. There is no need to connect anything to run ArcaOS. So there are reasons to run it. Now, if you have a machine that's not capable of running a 64-bit Linux compared to 32-bit Linux, what used to be tremendous hardware requirements for running OS2 by today's standards are slim.
Yeah, nothing.
So, I mean, if you have a machine that's got a gigabyte of RAM in it, you're off to the races. I mean, we can really install in 512 megs.
Yeah.
In a virtual machine, our recommended minimum memory is 256 megs. So we're very slim on resources. So you don't need to go out and get 16 gigabytes of RAM and a quad core processor, although we can run on quad cores beautifully.
Can you utilize quad cores?
Absolutely. We ship with an SMP kernel. We're good for up to, I think, 32 processors.
Nice. That's better than I was expecting you to be able to pull off. That's kind of cool.
For modern machines with multi-core processors, it is truly a thing of beauty. I mean, it feels so lean and mean that on modern hardware, OS2 it flies. It literally flies. Awesome. If you need to run DOS applications, if you want to run DOS applications.
Who doesn't want to run DOS applications?
There you go. You can't do that very well under Linux. And Microsoft has pulled out most of the DOS support from later versions of Windows. Well, we ship with a full DOS virtual machine and Windows 3.1.
Wait a minute. Wait. That was actually my next question. All right. So when I was running OS2 for the first time, it was Warp version 3. I was running it on a 486 with I want to say 16 or 32 megs of RAM, something like that, and I could boot up the basically all of Windows 3.1 because I had the special Windows 3.1 version of OS2, and it was so cool because I felt like I could run like basically 3 operating systems at once with OS2, and that was just neat at the time. You actually ship with Windows 3.1 still? Like you can do that?
Yes.
How?
Ships with a Windows 3.1 license.
What?
WinOS2 is what it's called.
Yeah.
And it runs 16-bit Windows applications with no problem whatsoever.
But how? I mean, surely just from a licensing perspective, how do you pull
That's
that off?
IBM's problem.
So you got the license from IBM to be able to do that, and IBM
Yeah,
works it all out with Microsoft, I assume.
correct. Correct.
Interesting. So you can, if you could buy Arca OS and basically get a copy of Windows 3.1. Well, it's not exactly, but it's Windows 3.11 inside OS 2
Correct. Correct.
in 2017.
In 2017. And with the other components that we ship, you do have the ability to run some 32-bit Windows applications. We ship with the Odin 32 compatibility layer, and Odin 32 is based on the Wine project.
Interesting.
So there are some Win32 applications that you can run natively on OS2, on ArcaOS.
This is this is just so much fun. All right. Oh my heavens! If people want to try this out, because realistically, if people are younger than I am, if people are in their 20s right now, they never had the experience, or probably never had the experience of being able to sit down, install, and use OS 2. Is it? Do you guys offer like a test drive version? Do you offer a video series? How can people kind of kick the tires and see what this is like? Is that possible?
Well, we don't offer any kind of trial version or evaluation. Our license with IBM specifically states that every copy that ships is a license that counts against our warehouse of licenses.
Gotcha.
And remember, again, we go back to the days when IBM was shipping Warp 4. Virtual machines didn't really exist. The license for ArcaOS specifically says one machine, one license. So if you want to install on a virtual machine, you want to set up 5 different VMs, you really need 5 licenses.
Every installation is a license, right?
Every bootable installation is a license.
Interesting. Okay, so that makes it just about impossible for you guys to offer basically the equivalent of like a live CD for people to try it out.
It really does. We have no provision with IBM right now for a live CD or anything like that. Now, we're certainly willing to look at the possibility going forward, but right now,
The
that's
license
not in.
precludes that. Yeah. I get that. You can't violate. You don't want to violate the license agreements with IBM. I just feel like that's not in your best interest.
Exactly. You don't pick on companies who are bigger than you are. You just don't do that.
And my guess is IBM's probably a little bit larger than you guys are. Slightly. Yeah, they're IBM. Oh man, that is such a bummer. How much does?
What you do have, though, is you have the availability for the first 90 days to get a reduced price for the personal edition, which is $99.
$99, and that ships. So that $99 for the personal edition, you get the Windows version inside of it and all that stuff.
Yeah, you get all that inside it with Samba 4 and support for 6 months with updates. After that, we'll have a support subscription for enhancements and fixes, and we hope to ship our next version late next year.
Super cool.
So we have a plan going forward. This isn't just a one-off deal that, the last hurrah. This is the beginning for us.
That is so awesome. So, I mean, all right. How long has it been since you did the release? It was just like a week or so ago, wasn't it?
May 15. It was 15. A week ago last night. How have things gone in the first week? Is there anything you can share about your experience of the first week at this point? I will tell you that I was probably expecting 20 to 25% of the sales that we've done.
Really?
But we have been 3 to 4 times busier than I would have ever imagined in my wildest dreams.
Really?
We are so busy. First of all, we had to move the server onto another box because the traffic was unmanageable.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, the site was getting hammered there for a while.
That most websites over here are hosted on OS2. There are about 50 virtual machines, 50 virtual hosts running on the main web server. And as soon as we went live, the processors maxed out. So we had to move the ArcaOS, the ArcaNoA website onto another machine to manage the traffic. And it has not let up since.
That's fantastic.
It's amazing.
That is
Amazing.
fantastic. Congratulations, man.
And I've been in the OS2 arena for many years. I can't tell you how great it is to see names coming in ordering this product, and I don't recognize those names. They're people I've never met.
They're not the regular Warp Stock attendees.
Exactly. It's truly amazing the number of people who have come to us from all corners of the globe, and we do sales around the world, who have been eagerly awaiting this release, and they've just been like the silent majority, sitting still and waiting and watching, and all of a sudden the floodgates opened, and we can barely keep up.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
It's fantastic.
Going forward, so you've got a plan, you've got a roadmap, you have new features you want to develop. How many people will be working on that realistically over the next year leading up to the 0.1 or whatever you want to call it release?
Our core development team is probably about a dozen guys. So we'll probably go with that same group going forward. We're always looking for new talent to add to the mix, but probably the same dozen guys. And I mean, we've got some ideas as to where we want to go with the next release. We'll have to see where we go between 5.0 and 5.01 before we get to 5.1.
Right.
We'll probably have a 5.01 and probably a 5.02 at least before we hit 5.1. And the question then is, what are we going to squeeze in those incremental updates before we get to the next release? So we haven't quite figured it out yet. And until we do, it's hard to say how many people we're really going to need to get the job done. But I will tell you that having financial resources from sales makes a huge difference in what we're able to do going forward.
Right. You can actually pay for people to do work. That's a big deal.
Absolutely.
It really just is still dawning on me that it is the year 2017, and not only do we have a currently shipping OS2 derived system, but we have a system that is shipping with support out of the box for both a fairly modern build of Firefox and Windows 3.1 in the same thing, side by side.
There is a current open office available for OS2 right now. 4.13 for OS2 runs on ArcaOS beautifully. And that's currently available.
I mean,
we don't ship it with the operating system, but it's available.
But it's available for download. It's there. That is just truly stellar. Lewis, if I could high five you through the internet for doing all this, I absolutely would. This is just incredibly cool. I'm normally very much a free software, open source thumping kind of guy. Like, I go around and I beat my chest, GPL, and that's what I do. But when I see projects like this, even though there's a lot of closed source stuff going on in here, I feel like you are doing some really good stuff here, and this is just so cool. I can't help but just cheer this on. Well done. I hope you guys have continued success. I'll pass this around so folks can see what you're up to. This might even be worthwhile to do a video review of the system in and of itself, just so people
Great.
can see what it's like nowadays. Because what a wild trip. The last time I installed OS2 on anything was an incredibly old laptop just to see if I could get it to run. And once I did, it flew and screamed and was a great little machine. But
Mhm.
since OS2 had been abandoned for so long, there just wasn't modern Firefox and everything else that I needed. But now
Yeah.
we have that, and that's so
It's
cool.
nice. It's nice, I got to tell you. And uh, there was something else I wanted to say about it, and it just completely fell out of my head.
Sorry, man.
Um,
I was going to say, if there's anything else you want to tell the world, now's your chance.
Essentially, it took me a while to get through to the right person at IBM. And when I finally did, I said, look, you have code that's sitting in your file cabinet that's growing hair. We want to pay you for it. We want to buy it from you. Please sell us some licenses. And
Just
once you put it that way to a large company, then the question is, how many licenses are you willing to buy?
right.
And once that problem is out of the way, then it's really just a matter of getting the rest of the I's dotted and the T's crossed.
Wow.
And that's exactly what we did. We set out with a mission and we went for it.
Great friggin' job, man. Louis
Thank you.
Rosenthal, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.
I am at this moment a little bit speechless. I I mean, right? They did that. They made an OS2 based operating system in 2017. That's like making a CPM based operating system in 2017. That's like taking Windows 2.0 or 3.0 and releasing it and shipping it in 2017. Oh heck, they kind of did that. They have Windows 3.1 shipping inside their system in 2017. That is amazing. It seems to me, well, you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. This company right here, System76.com, one of the sponsors of this show. They're awesome. They're straight up awesome. I wanted to show you some of their laptops real quick. Just really fast. I am a very big fan of their Galago laptop. I've made no ifs, ands, or buts about that one. But they do have some other really cool laptops here. Now, I've had a chance to play with the one they call the Serval workstation. I haven't got to play with it in a while, but it is a friggin' beast of a machine. And the crazy thing is, here, let's scroll down a little bit here. Here, well, I want to just go ahead and design it. So you can design your System 76 machines. You can choose your CPU and all that good stuff. So like your display, I can go in there and say 17.3 inch 4K display. 4K display, 17 inch on a laptop. And then for the graphics, I can go with an 8 gig GTX 1080. That's insane on a laptop. That's insane on a laptop, on a friggin' laptop. And then, of course, I can go with a 4.5 gigahertz i7, 64 gigs of RAM. I mean, you can just keep on chugging this thing out. It is a truly just glorious, glorious machine. And I love it. It's the kind of machine that you buy when you don't want to have a desktop. You know you're just going to have a laptop. One mammoth, behemoth laptop. The kind of laptop that if you show up at a LAN party with, everyone gets jealous because it's probably going to outperform most people's desktops. It's just, oh my gosh. I do love that laptop. It's not svelte. It's not super thin. It doesn't weigh 3.2 ounces. It's not feather light. I don't even know what kind of battery life it gets. I don't know. I honestly, when I use the Servo workstation, I don't remember if I even fully tested out the battery because that's not that's not its point. It's more of a extremely portable workstation, you know? And I love that machine. You can just slap a whole bunch of storage in it. I could do all of the work that I do on something like this. I could do all of the video editing comfortably, and that's really wicked cool. Anyway, system76.com, the servo workstation is really friggin' sweet. It's just a sweet, sweet laptop. Okay. Arca OS. Lewis was kind enough to get me a copy of that. So I'm going to be doing a video review of it because it's just such a unique thing. It is its own beast, you know? Nothing's like that. There's no, sure, you can run Linux or FreeBSD or something with DOSBox and Wine to get some Windows compatibility. But with this, what you are getting is quite literally a version of PC-DOS, which is MS-DOS compatible, and Windows 3.11 inside the operating system itself, running all at the same time as some sort of a cohesive whole. And in addition to all the OS2 applications, that is interesting. That is a truly fundamentally interesting proposition for someone who wants to do retro gaming or, you know, looking at older software, Windows software, old Windows 3.1 games and DOS games. If you want to have those sorts of games on a somewhat modern PC, this is kind of the perfect way to do that. And I don't know that that's necessarily what they had in mind when they decided I'm going to, update OS2. Clearly, there's lots of markets that need it. There's real, like, industrial things, all that sort of thing. But for me, as a guy who loves retro gaming, I'm looking at that and thinking, oh man, there are some good Windows 3.1 games and there's some great DOS games. If I could get those all loaded up on a machine, a dedicated piece of hardware that doesn't even have to be all that powerful, but can be fairly modern, off-the-shelf current components, I can use ArcaOS for that purpose, and that's neat. That's just super neat. So anyway, I'm going to do a video review of it. Totally separate from the Lunduke Hour. It's not going to be an upcoming episode or anything like that. I'll do like a screencast tour of me walking around inside of it. So if there's anything that you'd like to see done in ArcaOS to see how it works, whether it's, file management or preferences or boots or, launch times or performance benchmark, anything like that, just let me know and I'll see if I can manage to work it in somehow. I really do hope they have success, and I hope they have success in the way that allows them to, in the future, open source more of the system. And I know that that's honestly not even something that they may have much control over. That's really in the hands of IBM and all the various license holders that they've got. But it's truly fascinating just the same. All right, we've got more fun to come this week. It's only Tuesday. It's only Tuesday on the Lunduke Hour. We keep on rocking and rolling. We've got a lot of stuff coming up next week, too. I just realized I wanted to tease some of the stuff coming up, but I don't remember which day things are happening on, so we'll wait for that tomorrow. I'll tease you tomorrow with some stuff happening next week. All right, everybody, I would love more of your feedback on the new studio, on how things are coming together, on how things are looking, on what you like and what you don't like, what you'd like to see changed and tweaked. Feel free to let me know, because, hey, this is your show just as much as it's my show. I'm just kidding. This is totally my show. Just kidding. It's your show. Well, wait a minute. It's both of ours. You know what? This is someone else's show. It's not mine. It's not yours. Some other guy has this show. That's why it's called the Lunduke Hour.